love the thought of there being a world where pugs and dragons coexist.
It's just
Um,
unraveling, isn't he? Just
yeah.
completely.
Ooh, he's the hand of the king. What is happening to the hand of the king in this show? It's rotten. It's falling
Oh
off.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to We Need to Talk About, a weekly video series where Digital Spy talks about the biggest shows in the world. And this time around, that's House of the Dragon episode 3. I'm your host this week, David Opie, and I am joined by Janet.
Hi guys.
Emma.
Hi everyone.
And Ali.
Hello.
So, before we get started, please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you get these videos as soon as they come out. They are golden, you need to get on it. So this week we are changing things up slightly though, format-wise. Each of my guests has brought something to the table that they want to talk about specifically, and we're going to run through those talking points together. So first off, I just wanted to jump in very quick about the ending of episode 3. I am jumping ahead because that was a big fight scene. It was really great to see Daemon finally in action, proving himself to be the badass that we kind of assumed Matt Smith was going to be with all his eerie, moustache twiddling villainous approach. And it was really interesting to see kind of the tactics he used. He was a sneaky one, fighting against that crowd feeder, going up to his hideout with the white surrender flag, which obviously did not mean surrender by any means. And then the dragon popped up too. There was a lot going on. And the crowd feeder did not appear for very long either, which was interesting. I know fans of the books know he's not a big character, but the show was kind of setting him up to be bigger than it turned out he would be. He was very much a pawn, I think, in just showing Daemon's progression and ascension in the Stepstones. And it was very interesting. There's an interview actually with the actor who plays the crowd feeder where he talks about the mask is actually quite familiar to Game of Thrones fans because it was actually worn by, check my notes, the sons of the Harpy in Meereen. So the idea is that this is where the mask came from, and then this idea of the mask has survived these 172 years, or maybe a little bit less now. I think we're a little bit closer, but that's how it's now in Game of Thrones. So gotta love those cheeky little Easter eggs. But there was so much more to talk about with that final scene. So Emma had some really interesting parallels between that and Rhaenyra's return to the camp. Emma, do you want to kick things off there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, David, it seems weird starting at the end of the episode, but this was the big moment, as you said. But yeah, I mean, what a fantastic scene for this very mysterious character we're seeing, Prince Daemon, coming out and, as you said, completely butchering the crab feeder, literally cutting him in half. I mean, you can't get more Game of Thrones. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was a shock that him being literally cut in half was like, oh, okay.
But also, how was that? I mean, with the weapons he had, maybe he could. Valyrian steel is pretty sharp. Who knows?
I don't know. I kind of love that it was done behind closed doors in that cave, though. He just went off, did his business, came out and was like, yeah, look at me. But yeah, I love that scene. I thought it was a really powerful scene. Obviously, it was him being very stubborn and saying, I'm not going to wait for help. I'm going to go and I'm going to sort this problem myself. A big strength of power there. But it instantly took me back to a scene earlier on in the episode, which was Rhaenyra returning into camp with her own little trophy, I suppose, with the little boar that she had slain. In both of these scenes, both of the cousins covered in blood, very gory kind of aesthetic. And Rhaenyra was coming in and saying, look, I've been gone for, 24 hours and I can survive. I've had my emotional moment and I'm coming back stronger than ever, which is great for girl power. You guys know I'm a lover of that. But I thought it was really interesting how they kind of mirrored each other. And I was wondering if you guys are kind of now more intrigued to see how each of them grow, because they're obviously both have an interest in the Iron Throne and taking that for themselves. So yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how they're going to butt heads in the future, or perhaps join forces. We're going to have to wait and see. But yeah, what did you guys think?
Yeah, I think the two things that stood out to me there are, like, on the surface level, like, right, Rhaenyra and Daemon are like capital T Targaryens. Like they are, by their nature, like I think what we expect a Targaryen to be like. They're like bloodthirsty, they're powerful, they're headstrong, they like They
passionate
go
as
for it.
well.
Yeah, really passionate in a way that like Viserys is not. Viserys is way more kind of thoughtful, and I also think it was a really good like the parallel between their two actions is not only just like in the physical act of what they've done, like you said, they come back with this trophy, they've gone out on their own, but they both kind of like defied the intention around Viserys in that way. Like Viserys looking to help Daemon says no, well literally doesn't say anything in that scene, which is kind of what makes it so powerful, but says no, does it on his own. And then in Rhaenyra's case, we have obviously the scene, which I think we'll get to later on, with Viserys and the Brown Heart, and Viserys is like going on his hunt with Aegon or whatever, and Rhaenyra striking out on her own. I thought that was really cool to see them both kind of like carve their own path away from whatever Viserys's kind of like intentions are, what he wishes his family would kind of do and look like. So that was really cool. And yeah, I think like the bit in that final scene, I think David, I saw you smile then, like the fact that like Matt Smith doesn't say a single line basically in this episode. He has like one or two small moments, but it's like a completely dialogueless sequence, and it's so strong. Like it was a really, really cool moment.
It's funny that you said that he was he came back and he was like really powerful and stuff. I thought he was quite petulant, like, I'm not accepting your help, I'm just going to go out and do my own thing. He's literally been losing this war on the Stepstones for so long, and then his brother offers him help and he's like, you know what, screw this, I'm going in. You could have done this ages ago. So it's kind of a bit like, oh, come on, Daemon, you're really now showing yourself to be just a little bit childish.
I think they're both childish in a way, obviously, but I think weirdly there's a power in that, because they don't really give a fuck. They're just like, I'm gonna do me, like, wow, I'm gonna do what I want. And then actually, because they are quite powerful in the first place, it's kind of been paying off because they're quite unpredictable in that sense.
Well, Viserys earlier on in the show does say that they are quite similar, so I guess we're seeing those elements coming out.
Definitely.
As it goes on, as it progresses.
What does everyone think about the like general Valerian side of things? Obviously, we have like our first new non-Targaryen dragon rider in Corlys's Certain.
He's kind of Targaryen because of Rhaenys, so I think that's where they get their dragons from. But it was quite a powerful moment for them to see. Obviously, they come into House Valerian, and that's how we think of them. So to see another house with dragons was a bit taken aback, but I liked it. I like their show of force.
Well, speaking of majestic creatures that feature prominently, that's a nice time, I think, to segue into Janet, who wants to talk a bit more about that White Hart stag and the important symbolism behind that whole storyline.
I mean, I loved it. I loved what they were doing, because obviously this is Prince Aegon's name day, his second name day. Let's just call it a birthday, please. Anyway, it's his second name day, and this White Hart has been spotted, and then it's like the assumption is that it's given a great omen to Aegon, and then you see Otto Hightower, who's trying to manipulate the king into believing that it's a sign that, or a gentle reminder that it's a sign that he could be a great reigning king later on.
It's the king of the Kingswood, right? That's what
it's the king of the Kingswood. So it's all that kind of symbolism. It's all of that, and you think it's all for Aegon. You think it's all about him, but the hunting party completely fail. They fail in their mission to find this White Hart. They fail in their mission to capture it and kill it, which, if anything, is a bad omen for Aegon's succession, which they're trying to push so hard. It's a bad kind of foreshadowing. And then I thought it was really interesting the way that Rhaenyra was the one to see the White Hart. And not only that she saw it like in passing or anything like that, it's the kind of look that they give each other, like this White Hart is some kind of sentient being, and they're having like this conversation between each other, like this understanding. And then when Sir Criston Cole is about to kill it, she's like, hold on, let's let this thing go. But also, given that she's trying to prove a point, she came back with that boar. She could have easily killed that white stag. So why didn't she? Why didn't she bring it back into camp? Why didn't she show off her show of strength there? And I kind of thought that...
Why do you think that? Like, because that's the bit that's like the most interesting moment, right? It's like he pulls the sword out, and she's like, no. They look at each other, and then like we're kind of left to make our own assumptions about why.
Yeah, I just don't think she felt like she needed to. Like this, it felt like there was an understanding between these two, and maybe even she felt that that was some kind of good omen for her. So why slaughter it? Why, sully that moment? And she's come back with her own prize. She doesn't need to lord off this white stag in front of everybody else. That's how I took it.
I kind of saw it as well as like possibly another way of her defying like her father, because like she knows that this is what everyone in the camp wants. They want this white Hart stag. So the fact that she's the only one to have seen it and is like, no, we're going to let it go, was kind of a nice moment to be like, I'm not going to give you what you want. So yeah, it's really interesting, but you're right, that moment could be taken in so many different ways. And also seeing like, we've seen her aggressive side, so to kind of see her like peaceful and kind-hearted side as well is really, really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's like that because we think about, I think, the Targaryens and already all these characters as like being so quick to act, apart from Viserys being so quick to act and kind of being impulsive, and the fact that she has this moment where she's like, actually no, like maybe there's something to be gained here, because I think it's Game of Thrones, right? So you have to assume everyone is always politicking all the time. Like there is something to be gained in this moment from not taking the like obvious choice, by not immediately bringing, because I was like, oh, it's maybe you could see a world in which she like brings back the head of the white Hart and like puts it on the table, and it's like, but it's too obvious, and B, like she loves Viserys, right? Like they do have a special bond, and I think she understands that the trouble that would cause him in that moment perhaps is not,
it's not worth
the best thing for her.
So we talked a bit about the stag, you know, symbolizing some foreshadowing, some omens potentially. And we also see this in a broader sense of Viserys. He's starting to lose control. There's some doubts around the succession. So I know Emma and Janet, you had some points you wanted to jump in around that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know about you, Janet, but for me, throughout this episode was kind of just the beginning of Viserys' downfall.
It's just unraveling, isn't he? Just completely.
He's just completely losing control. He's very indecisive. He's getting advice from left, right, and centre, but doesn't seem to be taking any of it on board. And we kind of that was kind of mirrored in the way that throughout the episode he was getting more and more advice and drinking more and more wine to kind of numb the feelings. And then we of course see it with the stag killing at the end. You know,
he's so inept.
He's so inept.
So inept.
They've brought it to him, tied up. They've pointed, that's the spot, and he still doesn't do it right.
What is that? Oh my god!
Embarrassing is what it is.
Honestly.
But yeah, I mean, I think we know that whoever sits on the Iron Throne, they're always in a dangerous position and they're never around for too long. So I feel like this is foreshadowing the beginning of the end for Viserys.
I just think it's really interesting that he cut himself on the Iron Throne. And so ever since then, he just seems to be falling apart. And obviously to cut yourself on the Iron Throne, we know means that you're not fit to be on the throne, you're not fit to lead. Initially I was kind of like, no, maybe it's just giving him like, you know, a warning to do better. And no, he's just slowly falling apart. He's being manipulated by so many different people. As you said, he's hearing advice left, right, and center. And then he cuts himself. And I don't know if you guys must have noticed that he's losing his digits on his finger.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't notice that.
Falling off after he's cut himself on the Iron Throne. So I'm like, oh, Viserys.
But you might not have noticed, Ali, because there was one point where he has his digits back.
Really?
green screen fingers.
They mess up the CGI, so like they haven't gone gangrene. It's just a random where they fucked up. But yeah, the fingers are supposed to be missing.
We'll just assume that they're missing for the point of this conversation. But he's completely falling apart. And then there is that scene that he has with Alicent where she is. Where he's breaking down in front of her and he's talking about how he had doubts over Rhaenyra's succession, and how he had that dream that he kept trying to force into a prophecy of a male babe on the Iron Throne wearing the Conqueror's crown. And I think that conversation is going to be very poignant later on down the line, especially because we know that there's going to be a battle for succession. I think it was very dangerous, that information that he's given Alicent, that he felt like he had some kind of indecisiveness over who should be on the throne, even though he has that conversation later with Rhaenyra where he's like, okay, you know what, I had my doubts, but you know, I'm backing you completely. no one's there for that. No one's there to witness that.
Yeah.
So I feel like this conversation is going to come back and bite somebody in the butt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another, like, on a similar note, another thing he disclosed to Alicent in that conversation was that he essentially feels this burden of guilt because of what happened to Rhaenyra's mother. And he essentially says, you know, it's my fault, I made that decision. And he basically is saying that he's not sure what to do with Rhaenyra because he has that weight on him, and that's why she's kind of getting to do whatever she wants and not follow the rules, perhaps. So it's interesting that he told Alicent that, and that's another thing that she could in the future use against Rhaenyra.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Like, I like Viserys. I like Paddy Considine. Like, he's too soft for this role. But like, he's grieving still, I think, in lots of ways. And I think that's what's doing that motivation. And I think, like you said, I think he fears what the future might hold for Rhaenyra. He doesn't really want for Rhaenyra what happened to the Queen, despite him saying, you know, this has to happen. Like, I just think he's just not built for it. Bless him. And like you said, Janet, like the cutting, like obviously inside the fiction of Game of Thrones, cutting yourself on the throne is like an omen. But obviously from like a narrative point of view, he literally, the throne hurts him. Like it's just that. It's not a subtle metaphor, right? Like the throne hurts him and causes him to lose his power and his control over what he can grip. And it's very like on the page, it's there. So I think it's a bad fit.
Yeah, he's too nice for Game of Thrones, isn't he?
Yeah, we love him, but oh gosh, he's not the one.
So, you know, if Viserys is too good for this world, bless him. Bless Viserys. Who is the villain of the piece, as it were? We think, obviously, Daemon has been a bit problematic, let's say, to be generous, but maybe there's a secret villain. Maybe there's someone who's the real villain of the piece, and Janet thinks that might be Otto Hightower. Why do you think that, Janet?
He is clearly giving Peter Baelish vibes. Come on. He's like giving all the little single vibes completely and 100%. He is so manipulative, and he's trying to be really insidious in the way he's doing it. And we all know that he's problematic. We all know he's trouble. But Viserys, with his ineptitude, is so blind to what's going on. He's just literally, he's holding all the pawns in his hand and he's moving the chess pieces everywhere.
What if he's just a sweet old guy and he's just trying his best?
I mean, he's the hand of the king. It's a bad sign. If you're in that role, something's going down.
Oh yeah.
Ooh. He's the hand of the king. What is happening to the hand of the king in this show? It's rotten. It's falling off.
Oh my gosh!
Dun dun dun!
Genius, Ali.
There are so many moments. It's like I'm like huge, big Otto Hightower super fan, right? Like for me, this is Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones is a creepy old man whispering in your ear, getting you to like further his own ends. Like that is what the show is about in so many ways.
I'm not watching that show. That's unsettling.
That is what the show is, right? Like for as much as by the end of season 8 of Game of Thrones, the D&D wanted you to think it was like dragon fire and swords. Like it's not. It's council chambers and it's manipulation. Yeah. And he is currently our kind of one big master manipulator. But there are three big moments in episode 3 that are like really unhinged. Obviously we have the stag killing where he kind of I read that as like it's not the white stag, but come and kill this Hart and like it'll do the job we need to do, which we talked about. We've done the scene where he kind of suggests to Alicent that maybe she should again, like she's his pawn, she's his way in, which is really sad. And also like the most outrageous thing that happens in this episode, which we haven't talked about, is that bit where he's like, you know what you should do? Why don't you marry your son and daughter off together?
Oh yeah! Oh my God!
It's so wild. Like I was watching it, like, am I misreading this situation? But he fully looks at Aegon and is like, you know what you could do? Just marry them.
I know, and I love that he was just like, he's only 1 year old. Like that's the only problem.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But I mean, it is House of the Dragons, and it is the Targaryens. They do love a bit of incestuous behaviour. So that in itself is not. it's not as shocking as we find it. To them, it's like, yeah,
wow,
sure,
Janet,
why not?
wow.
I mean, it's the Targaryens. Come on. I mean, also, yeah. But yeah, it's bizarre. He's always just trying to further his own line. So he thinks, okay, well, if he's not going to give up on this Rhaenyra idea, marry the two off, and people are going to back Aegon, and he'll still have power. And I'm like,
he'll still be the grandfather of the king. Yeah, I think like Rhys Ifans is doing such a good job. Like the performance is pitch perfect. Like I like you see him in the background of every scene. Like you see the cogs turning. Like he's doing the thing. He's playing the game, right? Like everyone else is a Targaryen, and so they're just driving on impulse, really. Like apart from maybe the Valerians, but Otto is like actually thinking steps ahead. It feels like he's actually planning, and it's cool to see, because that's what we want from the hand. Like you said, Emma, like it's a schemy position to be in.
If you take a moment for his voice, though, it's very measured, very level, very calming. So you think, okay, he's wise. He's got some sage advice there. No, he's playing you. Oh,
yeah, it's that eerie sense of calm. He's just very mellow, very, very still, as you say. But we know he's up to something for sure.
Now, with all this talk of incest, let's perhaps move on to something a bit more tasteful, a bit more measured. Let's talk about war and death, because Ali, you wanted to mention a bit about the wives of the hunting party. Sorry, the wives of the hunting party and their kind of intriguing little chats they've been having.
Yeah, like I think we talked about some like really big moments and big scenes in episode 3. But one that stood out to me, a scene that really stood out to me, like about a quarter of the way through, once everyone arrives at Aegon's name day party, the hunting started. There is a scene where the kind of what we assume are kind of like the ladies and the wives of the lords who are on the hunt are kind of like gathered round having tea and cakes, and Rhaenyra kind of arrives in that moment, and they have kind of like it's a very brief conversation. It's like a minute and a half, but I think it's really key and really enlightening, given the way that this series, House of Dragon specifically, wants to talk about gender and think about gender and is pushing those questions to the forefront in a way that Game of Thrones didn't. This scene really stood out to me. Like you said, there's Lady Keira there. She's kind of like holding court. She's the woman with the pug. They're discussing the situation on the stepstones. They kind of turn to Rhaenyra and say, perhaps you can weigh in. And there's this whole thing about them saying, well, they kind of have their own opinions and feelings about what the king should do, which I think is really interesting. They say, well, the crown is at war. Rhaenyra's like, no, it's not. And it's just like this really small moment which gives you an insight into the kind of the conversations, the power structures that are happening just off screen. Like there are all of these dynamics that we're not seeing that are kind of happening behind the curtain, which I think is really cool. And it's really like the bit with the pug is funny. Like it's just a really nice microcosm of the series. So I think, the fact that like this conversation is happening was really interesting. And just again, is engaging with the idea of like, that we're not allowed to go on the hunt, but they're still having the same conversations that the lords are, just like in their own domain, in their own context. And then the other thing I wanted to flag as well was in that scene, there is a really quick, interesting moment where a man with a club foot joins them, Larys Strong, played by Matthew Needham. He says, may I join you? He said, I fear the gods did not make me for hunting, which I think is a really interesting line. And it's this quick moment of visibility about the other groups in the world of Game of Thrones who are marginalized and what their role might be. Like he has a visible disability. Where does he fit into this power structure?
Oh, he fits in.
So he is Larys Strong. His brother is Harwin Strong, Breakbones, who gets mentioned in this episode as a potential husband for Rhaenyra, and has a really good moment when Rhaenyra like is walking back through the camp with the boar, and the camera pans, and he's like big, bug-eyed, like a Looney Tune, so excited to see this like woman with blood on her face, which I thought was very funny. And their father, Lionel Strong, is like the Lord of the Law. He seems like a genuinely nice guy. So in this minute and a half, you get a really quick rundown of like what I feel like is foreshadowing a few things that we're going to see further on. So I want to flag it because I think it's like you could easily miss it, but I think it's a key moment.
I think having watched ahead, which I'm not going to give any spoilers to, you flagged some very interesting points, because the Strongs are worth keeping an eye on, which is all I'll say about that matter. But I did want to point out, it's funny that you were talking about the women in court and how they were talking about all the politics that were going on. And I just found it really interesting that their way in was through their husbands, because I think a couple of them, maybe one of them or a couple of them were like, yes, but my husband says, and my husband says. And I was like, that's really interesting that even though you're having these really deep conversations, because of the class system, because of the way things were, the only information you're getting is from your husband. And I thought that was a nice little tidbit to throw in there.
That scene could have been thought of as just like, oh, a quick little comical scene, but there's definitely a lot of important elements in there that hopefully, as Janet says, will come to pass in the next few episodes. But yeah, I mean, gender has always been such a big part of this show and of Game of Thrones in general. But yeah, as you said, it was really interesting to see a disabled character introduced there and to sort of see how they fit into the world. And also, personally, for me, I just love the thought of there being a world where pugs and dragons coexist. How wonderful is that?
It is not in Rhaenyra's nature to be deceitful. I cannot say the same for your brother.
So that's all the biggest things we needed to talk about this week. Let us know what you thought about everything we raised chatting about episode 3 today. Thank you also just for watching, and we will see you next week for House of the Dragon episode 4. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.